Let's drive across America, we said.
Let's do a road trip to see America's art.
We'll crisscross the country visiting great galleries and great buildings.
We'll meet artists and curators and a painting elephant.
And we'll see roadside attractions, oddball collections, all kinds of Americana, and a roller coaster.
This is Mame McCutchin.
This is Charlie Luxton.
And together we're going to travel 10,000 miles across America, taking in more than 25 states and a couple of cities in Canada.
And what do you need for a road trip like that? But 35 feet and 11 tons of art bus.
Of course you do. This is America.
This is ARTLAND, USA.
We're on a mammoth art and architecture adventure, traveling right across the United States of America.
And after 6,200 miles, we finally crossed the Mississippi and we're moving into the northeastern states.
And as you can see from this windshield, it's been a bug massacre the entire way. Every mile, we get closer to your house.
And you get better at driving.
Oh, come off it. I nailed this after 300.
I nailed it miles to find the right side of the road.
Rubbish.
It's the 6th week of our journey, and we're driving into the Rust Belt, where the RV should feel right at home. Twisting a path through the heart of American manufacturing, we're leaving Chicago behind us and heading through Cincinnati, Detroit, and on towards Pittsburgh.
I see how a Seurat becomes surreal and how a painting becomes a sculpture. And before it all becomes too confusing, I explore the early life of the prince of pop art.
Meanwhile, I hog the wheel of the RV, unearth pictures in one of America's most exciting archives.
Isn't it amazing, just these moments that have gone?
And see rather a lot of fabulous buildings, including this one. You just might have seen a picture of it before. Driving across the Midwest, we've driven through a fair number of modestly sized towns, but not one of them has been anything like this. Welcome to Columbus, Indiana, and to one of the most remarkable architectural stories I've stumbled upon. And because a big bus is no way to get around a small town, it's time to take to two wheels.
Columbus, Indiana is fairly typical of any small to medium Midwestern town of about 38,000 people. It's got a nice little high street, it's got a few churches, a library, a couple of out-of-town outlet shops. But where it's extraordinary is that there are more than 60 monuments, buildings, and parks in this place designed by nationally and internationally renowned architects. Recently, the American Institute of Architects produced a list of places to see architectural innovation and design. Columbus, Indiana was 6th, up there with New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, which is, well, simply quite nuts.
Over the past 60 years, the people of Columbus have invited many of the world's masters of architectural modernism to design their public buildings. For example, this Lutheran church is a design by Gunnar Birkitz. And over there, just behind Henry Moore's Arch, is the town's library by I.M. Pei. Remember the glass pyramid outside the Louvre in Paris? He did that too. So how did this tiny town attract Pei and his peers? I'm hoping to find out from a man who works in this building by Skidmore, Owens and Merrill, the architects who are designing Manhattan's Freedom Tower. He's Harry McCauley, editor of the local newspaper, The Republic. We meet outside the building that kick-started a small-town architectural revolution.
It all started back in 1942 with the building just behind us, First Christian Church. The Miller family here in Columbus decided that they needed to have a church that spoke of the community. And they were the leading members of this particular congregation, so they led a drive and They decided to go beyond just an in-house architect and go out and find someone who has a national fame, and they came upon Eliel Saarinen. And so out of that came the Cummins architecture program.
The program was an audacious scheme whereby the town's biggest employer, Cummins Inc., agreed to pay the architectural fees for any public building, including this, the Columbus City Hall. The proviso being that officials had to choose from a list of significant architects. It's now nearly 50 projects later, and there have been some truly remarkable commissions. This, for example, might look like a chic hotel, but in fact, it's the county jail by Dom M. Hisaka and Associates.
Did the local people come to expect a higher level and quality of architecture?
Again, I think your average Columbus resident is someone who goes to work, comes home, watches television, goes about their day-to-day life. They can't tell you that a building was designed by I.M. Pei or a Saarinen, and they could care less. They don't know anything about the elements of design that went into it. But when it makes their life that much easier to get along, to live, that I think that there's a kind of an inner appreciation for it. And you have to look at it that a lot of people, when they come here, decide to stay, and the architecture plays a big part in that.
This building initiative is win-win for everyone involved. The Cummins Foundation achieves profile and status. The town thrives aesthetically and also economically through tourism. The lives of local people are enriched by a better environment. And civic monuments, often flatly functional in other towns, instead become examples of truly exceptional design. Like this war memorial by Thompson and Rose Architects.
It's an incredibly moving piece of work. On the outside you have the names of all of the soldiers who were killed, and then on these columns on the inside you have excerpts from citations, from letters home, from postcards out to the troops. You walk around, June 1944, dear Mum and Dad, it's about the middle of June, and by the time you receive this letter, I will have been in action. He was killed in the Pacific in July, just a month later, 1944. It's really interesting because people think of modernist design as being so impersonal, and yet you come into something like this and it kind of hits you so much harder than great big classical statues that don't mean anything. This is really about people. I think that's what's amazing about this town, is it's modern design working for people. And it really can do if it's done well. This is extraordinary.
We shape our buildings, and thereafter, they shape us, observed Winston Churchill. And Columbus, Indiana, has been shaped beautifully.
When I first spoke with the producer about some of the oddball stories for ARTLAND, this next one struck me as maybe the weirdest of them all. Of all the towns in all the world, I had to walk into Alexandria, Indiana.
The world's largest paintball, have you been there to see? Right here in Alexandria, please come by to see.
And why come all this way? Doesn't everyone know? Alexandria is home to the world's largest ball of paint.
The world's largest paintball, have you been to see? The world's largest paintball, it's quite a sight to see.
And people here seem mighty proud of it.
It must be huge, they say it is.
Believe me, you better be ready to paint if you're going to paint the paintball, because it's huge.
Oh, the ball of paintball, it's quite a sight to see. Come on, everybody, and come and sit with me.
Started out as a little baseball. in the Guinness Book of Records now and been on, I think, several TV shows with it.
Legend has it that the ball of paint had a humble and accidental genesis when a baseball landed in a pot of paint. Enough said. Time to meet the talk of the town, or at least its maker for the last 29 years, visionary and artistic guru, painter and decorator, Michael Carmichael.
I do this every day, 3 or 4 times a day sometimes.
You're kidding? Every day you're out here?
Yes.
And do you have a goal for weight or coats or anything?
My ultimate goal was 20,000, but I'm gonna reach that. I'm gonna reach that in another month.
For your next birthday, you're gonna reach that.
Yeah, and but I'll continue on. No.
So what happened? How did you decide to paint that baseball?
It was totally accident. Me and another kid was throwing a baseball, and we knocked over a can of paint. That ball got in that paint, so I wrapped a wire around it, and I just started dipping it and painting it. And after putting 1,000 coats on it, I watched it kind of grow pretty quick, so.
Now, would you consider this ball of paint to be art?
I believe so. I could call it art now.
You could call it art. Yes. You don't sound entirely convinced.
Well.
What if somebody else said it wasn't art?
Well, I'd probably have to go along with whatever they say.
How come?
I don't know. It's just, most people call it artwork, but I'm not really sure.
I think it's your sculpture.
I know.
Your opus.
I know. As
the great German artist Joseph Beuys once said, everybody's a special kind of artist. And if Beuys had ever come to Alexandria, he'd have seen his theory played out perfectly. Who knows? He might have slapped on a coat of paint himself. So long, Alexandria, Indiana.
It's the next day, and I'm back where I belong, sitting behind the wheel. We're leaving Indiana and heading east. On average, we're traveling about 150 miles a day. And Mame stays awake for about 5 of them.
We're on our way to Columbus, Ohio, to visit the Wexner Center. Now, the Wexner Center is an internationally renowned art center that has an amazing residency program. And at the moment, there's an artist called Anne Hamilton there. Now, I have to admit, I don't know a whole heap about Anne Hamilton's work. I do know that she represented America at the Venice Biennale a few years ago. But in a way, that's what's so great about this program, this show, ARTLAND. You turn up, you meet someone, you get to know their work, and you get to know what makes them tick. I've got a feeling this is going to be a very interesting day.
My briefing page for the Wexner Center tells me that it's a multidisciplinary international laboratory for the exploration and advancement of contemporary art. A sort of NASA for artists, I think. But how has it helped Anne? And just as importantly, what's Anne's art all about? Anne's work includes textiles, fabrics, photographs, and performance. She's often described as an installation artist. She's as fascinated with verbal and written language as she is with the visual. And she's concerned with the process of making art, as well as with the experience of viewing it. Got that? I'm not sure I have either, so we better meet.
I don't mean to be rude, but it's not the tidiest studio I've ever been in before.
It's not, is it?
Is that representative of the way you work, or?
I think it's the product of working simultaneously on a lot of different things. You know, you test things out and you try things, but I don't actually produce the final thing here. Like
really?
No, not at all. So I work so that I work on site, and I work in response to other architectures. So we're doing like small bits here, but the whole thing actually really happens on site.
You test, you get it straight.
and this is my studio.
That is quite a collection of tables you've got there. Why are you collecting tables?
I started collecting them because in my work, the table's almost like the blank page. It's like...
That's your display surface, that's your
Well,
your
I think
canvas.
it's an object that I've used a lot. Yeah, so it's like it sets the landscape. It always implies the social. It's a place where you work. It's a place of like solitary activities like reading and writing. It's a place where you eat.
This desire to engage with something as everyday as tables is typical of Anne's work. She wants us to think again about these objects, wrestling with what they mean to society, to me, to you. For Anne, nothing is mundane, apart from probably a few of my questions.
What else is there that we can see that kind of illuminates this, this body?
I don't know how much it will illuminate it, but we can go over this way. No, these are iris prints, which is the way the pigment goes into the paper. Gives it this kind of way it pulses the surface a little bit.
So how does it do that?
They were made with just a single chip video camera, you know, those little surveillance ones.
Yeah.
And first we made this book that became a score.
Oh, that's a lovely cover.
Yeah, isn't this, this is a beautiful little publication.
Beautiful thing.
And there were people who wore this kind of coat dress thing that we made, and they wound by hand these wind machines that we made based on traditional theater wind machines, you know, with the drum and the cloth, and they roar. And this, at the time it was made, became almost like a score, so that at the opening, it was a little odd, but 4 people stood and turned the pages and tried to form their mouth in the shape of the image on the page.
I can't pretend that I understand all of Anne's work. I find the ideas complex and more than a touch elusive, but perhaps therein lies much of their charm. We need art to be strange and challenging, and often it can be all the more powerful for preserving a little of its mystery.
What is your relationship with the Wexner?
I'm spoiled rotten by the Wexner. I mean, one, there aren't that many institutions that I think make that kind of singular commitment to support someone's research wherever they are, and to give them the opportunity to do something they wouldn't do otherwise without knowing in advance what that product might be or what it might result in. It's very few places that do that, and it is like the largest, most extraordinary gift that you can give somebody.
Another great thing about this job is having a nose round artists' studios. I don't get all of Anne's ideas, but architectural model type things are definitely my bag.
It's been a real privilege to meet Anne today and look around her studio. It's given me a real insight into a very complex and creative mind. But perhaps the most important point for me has been to understand the relationship between sympathetic institution and artist. Because the Wexner is not demanding Anne to produce work at the drop of a hat or by a certain deadline. And this freedom and support has allowed pieces of work to come into being that never would have happened otherwise. And I suppose any woman who has that good a table collection is ace in my mind.
I love it when you can touch artwork, but usually that's not allowed. But finally, I found a painting that I can walk into.
This is the topiary garden of the Old Deaf School in Columbus, Ohio. It's the only topiary garden in existence that's based on a work of art. Recognize the painting? Need a clue? If I said it was a French Impressionist masterpiece, would that help? And that the painting can be found at the Art Institute of Chicago? Yep, it's Georges Seurat's A Sunday en La Grande Jatte, 1884. The painting features 54 people, 8 boats, 3 dogs, a monkey, and a cat. All are lovingly recreated here, mostly from trimmed yew trees. Jim Mason, green-fingered sculptor, hatched the idea with his wife.
We first started putting it in 1987. By 1990, we had pretty much everything in place. Of course, nothing was grown out. It's still growing. It's not yet complete, but then it'll never be complete. I mean, this is a garden. It's evolving constantly. But if you notice in the front, the taller figures, they take longer, of course.
When you're doing a 3D representation of something that's 2D, you have a backside that you don't have to think about when you're looking at the 2D picture. How did you deal with that?
Well, that's the surprise part. That's the fun part. Actually, Seurat, he did several sketches of that site that he ultimately painted from different angles. And that was kind of fun to play with.
So you took a little creative liberty.
Yeah, a little creative liberty. I'm quoting Seurat on the front side, but the back side you kind of squeeze in your own ideas.
It feels like a little corner of Paris here.
That's kind of the idea. It's a landscape of a painting of a landscape. So it's a pun, it's a visual pun. We took an icon out of the temple, the Orthodox temple of high art, and we put it in the context of the pedestrian. So it becomes the Arcadian myth right here that you can walk into, and it's probably the closest we'll ever get to the Arcadian myth.
Well, I'll let you get back to it. But pleasure to meet you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much. Nice meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Arcadian myth, urban oasis, or impressionist retreat? I have to say, I loved my stroll on the island of La Grande Jatte.
Next up, it's Cincinnati. But before we get there, we have the joy of lunch on board the RV.
A guide to eating on the road. Sandwiches. Endless sandwiches. I've come here to the Contemporary Arts Centre in Cincinnati, which is housed in a new building by the controversial British architect Zaha Hadid. Now, since it opened in 2003, this building has received rave reviews, and there it is. It's really quite extraordinary. But for once, I'm not here to talk about architecture. I'm here to talk about art. In fact, to meet 2 members of an art collective called Simpark, who bridge the boundaries between art and architecture, dealing with evocative and sensitive issues with more than a touch of humour.
I've heard that the Simpark guys are a particularly laconic duo. I think we're going to get on just fine. They want to show me something which has been making them smile.
Hey. Hello.
Hi.
I'm Charlie.
Charlie.
Hi.
Matt. Steve.
Hi. So, what are these?
These are readily available targets from lawenforcementtargets.com, letargets.com.
So I can buy these?
You can buy these. They're about 70 cents each, I think.
Well, for target practice?
Yeah.
Well, I think they're used by enforcement agencies, like in maybe Dirty Harry.
Okay.
They have, but they're getting more realistic, kind of the average American, I suppose, is what we liked about it. Like anybody could have a gun. Anyone can be a threat, and you have to make a snap decision.
And so is this the kill zone here that you're...
Right, yeah. Yes, the sweet spot.
But they're very ordinary kind of American figures, aren't they?
Yeah, but they could still
blow you away.
Go crazy. Yeah. Yeah. You never know who's going to maybe try to take you out.
Oh, this is a good one. This is a fantastic one.
Yeah, household dispute, I guess, or something about the grocery store.
Yeah. You should have cleaned your room.
No, that's this one.
Oh, that's...
Despite the idle chat, these targets are featured in a number of art installations by Simpark. When the targets were shown at London's Tate Modern, one critic wrote that they defy explanation of any sort. I think this is a little unfair. Simpark's art seems to me accessible and inclusive. After all, they're best known for building a fully functioning skate bowl, which they've shown in posh galleries around the world. And they encourage us to draw our own meanings from their interactive work, even if some of their sculptures wouldn't be out of place in a children's playground.
This is the Rockin' Trailer, renamed to the Rockin' Trailer from its original title, Hell's Trailer.
The idea is if you can't roll, you may as well rock if you can't.
Something like
this. Just throw your weight around.
Why does it rock?
We saw these moribund trailers just sitting there docked in the backyard. You know, a long time ago they'd been on the road, but now they're just sitting there rotting. So we figured we'd make ours kind of still in one place, but kinetic. You can still go for a ride.
Okay.
So that was the point. If you can't ride, you may as well ride.
A conceptual journey rather than a trip with all the hassles and tolls and gas.
And why Hell's Trailer?
I don't know. Some people might not feel so good after riding in here.
Believe me, this is almost as rough a ride as the RV.
Good milkshake. It's better to do before lunch then.
With our driver Adam at the wheel and leaving Cincinnati behind us, we're taking the I-75 north to Detroit.
Can we not have sandwiches today for lunch?
No, we can have sandwiches. We always have sandwiches. That's all we eat on this trip. Sandwiches.
I really don't want to have a sandwich. Look,
I'm having sandwiches.
if I can get like a Reuben the size of your head, then I'm up for sandwiches.
What did Jerry say about sandwiches?
Never eat anything bigger than your head.
That's right.
The editor Jerry's mum, very good advice. Never eat a sandwich bigger than your head. We've learnt that on this trip.
What else have we learnt this trip?
Next day, and it's rush hour in Detroit, Motor City. where in 1896 Henry Ford built his first automobile and gave birth to the assembly line. At one time, it was the manufacturing powerhouse of America. This is the Detroit Institute of Arts. I'm here to see one of the most famous murals in the world. The Detroit Industry Frescoes by Mexican artist Diego Rivera. A committed Marxist, Rivera was invited to the heart of American capitalism and commissioned to relate the history of Detroit and the development of industry. My guide to the murals is an Englishman, curator Graham Beale.
Rivera was indeed Mexican and a communist, but he made a good deal of his income from painting society portraits in the US, especially in California. And one year, the then director, William Valentina, was in California in 1932 and bumped into Rivera, this well-known muralist, and so he asked him if Rivera would be interested in doing a mural in Detroit. Rivera, of course, knew that Detroit stood for Henry Ford and capitalism, but he also knew that it was this great industrial city that pointed to the future in the way that, say, Stalin and others wanted to do so. So he accepted the idea. Rivera and Frida Kahlo came to Detroit in April of '32 and started sketching in the Rouge River plant for a while, and then started working on these murals. In 8 months, he did the whole thing.
These murals perfectly capture Rivera's notion of a noble proletariat working in harmony with the industrial machine. The workers' dance-like poses are part of a mechanized ritual. There is a collective strength in their common purpose, while their capitalist leaders are all but banished to cameo roles. Are there any portraits in the mural?
Actually, yes. The Henry Ford himself is featured there as a composite portrait of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison.
Not very flattering.
Not particularly flattering. And then Henry is also featured as a teacher in the lower grisaille panels, which is really funny because Rivera's wit, he shows Henry Ford teaching, but the engine that he's teaching, the motor engine that he's teaching, has been turned into a dog.
And does the artist himself?
The artist appears in a bowler hat with a group of men who have turned green by being poisoned by the chemical processes that they're involved in. The work that they're doing to earn their living is actually killing them, and so Rivera's included that in sort of the bad side of the relationship between man, industry, and nature.
What's the process like for painting?
This is true fresco. It's not just paint on the wall. When he came to the United States, he then hired individuals who he trained as assistants. And those assistants were entirely concerned with making the plaster that goes onto the wall in a series of layers, 7 layers, the last one of which you paint on. But those assistants have to put the plaster on the wall, and that's hard work, it's a lot of work. And then the artist then goes in and paints just that amount that is wet paint. And he has to get it done quickly because the plaster is drying, and as it dries, it becomes less of a true fresco. And the great thing about fresco is that as the paint dries in the plaster, it bonds chemically as well as physically. So you can take a hammer to a fresco and chip it, and you will find the same stuff underneath as is actually right on the surface.
So the artist had to get it right on the first go.
Yeah, if you make a mistake, you have to hack the whole thing off altogether.
When this work was finally revealed to the public, what was the response?
Well, the most immediate response was Rivera's. He felt that it was undoubtedly his finest mural. Beyond that, public response has been very varied. There were people who loved it and hated it in the 30s, mainly for political reasons. There was a very influential radio priest just up the road who called for it to be jackhammered off the walls because he felt that some of the panels were blasphemous. And sort of made fun of religious imagery. At the same time, when he asked for that and got a petition, then members of the Auto Workers Union came in and stood almost shoulder to shoulder, guard around it until that threat dissipated. And now it is essentially our crown jewel.
And it seems to me that it's not just a wonderful work of Diego Rivera, but it's also a very strong piece of history for this town.
Yes, it really speaks to what gave Detroit the greatness that it had, whether you call it, you know, the arsenal of America, or whatever you want to call it. This was the great powerhouse. This was the old Detroit that we no longer see.
I'm struck by the scale and ambition of Rivera's work, but I'm also surprised by the way he has transformed a manufacturing line into something exquisite.
After Detroit, it's on to Pittsburgh. But we've got a couple of treats to enjoy before we arrive. There's another brilliant building somewhere off in the forest. But before that, you've guessed it, there's today's onboard lunch.
I want to show you something really special. We've just found some green vegetables for the first time in days.
Trust me, these single-lane dirt tracks were made for 35-foot-long, 13-foot-high RVs. We're lost again, but our spirits are high as we're on our way to an architectural jewel, and we soon make our way out of the mist.
I've come to rural Pennsylvania to visit one of the most recognizable houses on the entire planet. The Kaufman House, or Falling Water, as it's better known, by Frank Lloyd Wright. Now, it's a really fascinating building because while it's so iconic, I think very few people know what it's like inside or actually how it works as a building, as a home, and I certainly don't. So I'm looking forward to finding out. Well, Mr. Lloyd Wright, let the lesson begin.
Falling Water was built as a weekend retreat for Edgar Kaufman, a department store owner from Pittsburgh. Designed in 1935, it was constructed from stone quarried from the site itself. And 70 years on, it's probably fair to say that Frank Lloyd Wright's creation is the most famous modern house in the world.
Wow, that's incredible. This wall is really low. This balustrade is coming just over my knee. And it's got to be a good 10, 12 meters down to the bottom of the waterfall. So while it looks very dramatic from the picture postcard from down by the waterfall, you have no idea of how vertiginous and kind of dangerous it feels to be up here. It's exhilarating, incredibly exhilarating.
I'm off to meet Sarah Cleary. She's worked here for 16 years, so she should be able to tell me a thing or two that the books won't.
Was it a very expensive building to build?
Well, it didn't start out that way. Wright was given a budget of between $20,000 and $30,000 for this house. And to put that into context, at the time you could purchase a 4-bedroom brick home in Pittsburgh for about $5,000.
Right, so a significant amount of money.
Yeah, well, but it didn't end up that way. The house ended up at $155,000.
Wow. How did the Kaufmans actually receive the idea of the building being sat almost right on top of the waterfall?
The Kaufmans knew they were getting a house closer to the waterfall, but never in their wildest dreams thought they were going to get a house over a waterfall. They thought it'd be somewhere nearby.
You're probably just as intrigued as I am to see inside. And yep, as you might expect, Frank Lloyd Wright even designed most of the furniture and fittings. Simply incredible.
just like to show you something here in Mr. Corfin's actual his dressing room. This window is full height, and as it opens, it swings through this beautiful cutout in the desk. Now, if I'd been doing this, I would have thought, right, break the window here and have an opening panel above and a bit below, but Frank Lloyd Wright just says, no, just describe this arc into the surface. It's beautiful. It's a lovely little solution. How did the Kaufmans respond to the house when it was finished?
Oh, they loved it. There's a really nice letter from Lillian from, I guess it was around Christmas time in 1938, where she writes a letter to Frank Lloyd Wright thanking him for putting this joy into their lives. She often commented that Wright's architecture was her life education.
It strikes me as being a very humane house, a very comfortable house to be in, that really understands the way people live. Do you think that's one of its main strengths?
Well, I think that's Frank Lloyd Wright's biggest strengths. I mean, I think that's why, among the modernists, there's no more sensual design than with Wright. I mean, this place is about touching. This place is about knowing where the sun is at any part of day. It's about smelling burned wood in the fireplace and hearing the waterfall. It's a specific kind of experience that's tied to this Bear Run landscape. And that's what Wright was all about. He was pursuing a very individualistic architecture. You know, you hire an architect to do a building, and there's a lot of really good buildings, but a really great architect knows more about you than you do. And I think that's what happened here. Wright produced an environment for the Kaufmans that they never could have visualized or communicated to them. That's why you hire architects.
I've been looking forward to visiting this house probably more than anything else on this entire trip. I came here expecting to have a lesson to learn, but actually it's been more than that. I've been humbled by the incredible creativity of Frank Lloyd Wright, the ideas that have poured out of his mind onto paper and then into this building. In many ways, it's just so incredibly brave. I mean, just think of it, coming to this valley before the Second World War in the 1930s and going, you know what? I'm going to stick the house on top of the waterfall. It's just such big thinking. I'm lost for words. But maybe it's because this is the perfect house.
It's the afternoon and time for a quick ARTLAND trivia quiz. What's the largest inland port in the United States? And which city has more bridges than any other in the world? 446 if you're asking.
I'm in Pittsburgh, Steel Town, USA, also home to Andy Warhol, and I'm hoping to find out what it is about this city that made him such a great American artist.
Attempting to reveal the real Andy Warhol has almost become an obsession since the artist's death in 1987. Artist, illustrator, filmmaker, publisher, author, and chat show host, Warhol was acutely aware of the roles of mythology and image in creating celebrity. But where did his image end and the person begin? And can we ever know? I want to try and sketch a portrait of the artist as a young man, and I've come to the Andy Warhol Museum to explore the early years of his life. I'm hoping that archivist Matt Warbican can help.
When was Andy Warhol born?
Well, that's a really good question, Mame, because there's been a lot of debate about when he was born. Actually, it's always kind of been difficult because he was always in later years shaving years off of his age. But we have the proof that he was born. This is his baptism certificate, and it says he was born on August 6th, 1928. He would usually say 1930 or 1931. And it also says clearly that he was born in Pittsburgh, and he was always telling people he was born in Philadelphia or Cleveland, and there's even one where he says he was born in Honolulu.
Why didn't he want people to think that he was born in Pittsburgh?
We don't know. I think maybe he just felt it wasn't very glamorous.
Oh. So what was his family like?
Well, they were really devout Greek Catholics, and they were immigrants. His parents had both immigrated to the United States from present-day Eastern Slovakia. Andrei Warhol was his father, and Julia Zavacki Warhol is his mother.
So wait, there's Warhol and there's Warhol.
He dropped the A. He felt it was too ethnic.
How did he do in school?
He did really, really well, and we actually have his grade transcripts, which is like a totally amazing document.
Oops.
Well, yeah, but that's trigonometry. I mean, come on. And no one will ever mistake Warhol for a mathematician. But he did, you can see, in English, he did very, very well. He studied Latin for 2 years and did sort of average. But then, where's his art grade? There it is.
Wow.
He got absolute top of the rank, yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating. When did Andy Warhol develop an interest in celebrity?
When he was a kid. I mean, he loved going to the movies, especially Shirley Temple's movies. He was a huge fan of her. And we have the autographed photograph in this folder.
Oh, the old colorized black and white.
Well, actually, this is hand-colored.
So this was maybe the beginning of his collection of celebrity photographs?
This is right around the beginning. A lot of folks say that this was, his really prized possession.
Andy was the youngest of 3 brothers, and John Warhol, the middle brother, has offered to share some personal recollections of their childhood.
Andy would come home from school, I'd meet him at home, and we'd just eat a sandwich, and then we'd always open up a candle. There wasn't all these variety of soups, but I remember the tomato soup we used to have. So I guess he ate so much of that Campbell's tomato soup that that's why he painted those, the pictures of the Campbell soup.
I'm very interested in the relationship between Pittsburgh and his work. Do you see anything in his work that suggests Pittsburgh?
And I think it's a work ethic where he's seen everybody working that hard, It was just hard work. And anytime I visit him, like in the summer when we were going home on a Sunday, and I asked Andy, I says, are you going to go out to your townhouse? It was like 90 degrees up there. He says, nah. He says, I think I go down to the studio and just paint.
Had you noticed a change from how he was here in Pittsburgh to after he moved to New York, after he was there a few years? Did he change at all?
Not really. Especially when he became famous, people would ask me, well, did Andy ever, what do you remember mostly about Andy? I says, no matter how much fame he had or how much money he had, I said, he never changed, not to me. And I don't think he did that to other people. I said, he was always the same.
It's really intriguing to hear John talking of his brother never changing. I look again at the black and white photographs of Andy Warhol's childhood. Can I recognize the celebrity-obsessed art star of later years? So much has been written and said about Warhol, and now there are so many books and films. But perhaps all this material serves only to obscure the man that this child became. To this day, Warhol remains enigmatic, even distant. And yet, his work connects with so many of us.
We have one day left in Pittsburgh, and I have the opportunity to see a unique side of the city's life through the lens of photographer Teenie Harris.
Teenie Harris Archive is one of the most significant and largest collections of photographs of Black Afro-American culture in the entirety of this enormous country. There's more than 80,000 images and negatives stacked away in boxes by the great man himself, Teenie Harris. Now, some of these have never even been opened. The Teenie Harris Archive project is a project to have a look at all of these pictures, sort through them, work out what's important, and what's not. So there's some lucky people inside this building who are seeing photographs that haven't been seen for 30 or 40 years. I'm sure you've noticed, that's Sir Richard Serra.
Teeny was a Pittsburgher. He was born here in 1908 and died in 1998. And he spent most of his life from 1930 until about 1980 photographing the city, especially his neighborhood, all of its communities, everything from the most glamorous moments to the most routine and some of the most scary. He worked for many years for the Pittsburgh Courier, which was the leading African-American newspaper in the country. And his images went across the country recording aspects of Black life that would otherwise not be seen.
Why is this such a significant body of work?
Well, there are several reasons. First of all, there's a lot of it. There are 80,000 negatives as far as we can count. And it covers a very important moment in the history of the African-American population in the country. Pittsburgh at the time was one of, after Harlem, was probably one of the most important cultural centers for the African Americans in terms of sports, entertainment, civil rights, publishing, music. And so what was going on here was itself important.
What are you learning about Pittsburgh and African American culture here at that time?
I wish I could have been there. It was extraordinarily exciting.
And I get a chance to be there when one of Teenie Harris's archive boxes is opened for the first time.
Hi, how are you?
It's nice to meet you.
So is this a virgin, unopened box?
That's right. This was film that Teenie Harris would have exposed, developed, used in the paper, and then he put it back in the original film box to store it. So it might be a mixture of events, it might be a mixture of dates. We just have no idea.
So you have no idea what you might find in there?
Not at all.
Not even all from the same role, or?
Exactly.
Could be anything?
Could be a mixture of decades, even.
And how many of these are there?
Several hundred.
Several hundred?
Yeah, probably close to 1,000 of these individual boxes, and they may have anywhere from 3 or 4 negatives to maybe 50 in the box as well.
So everyone's just a little piece of the unknown.
Exactly.
Go on then.
So, let's see what we've got. So we may have 1940 Air in there also. Oh, and we have a Bathing Beauty.
Now what's the blue?
The blue staining is cyan staining. It's a chemical process that was developed to replace early nitrate film that was flammable. And it was probably only around through the 1940s.
So she's Miss Pinup.
Miss Pinup of
1940 something, can't see that.
Yeah.
And she's coming out of the swimming pool, but she's wearing high heel shoes.
Right.
That's
So
an
we're
unusual
hoping
swimming outfit. But you've also got Agfa film, Kodak
in a Kodak box.
That's normal, is it?
Yeah.
He wasn't the greatest self-archivist then.
Exactly. Nobody, unfortunately, thinks of that at the time.
Can we look at another few?
Sure.
I'm fascinated. I mean, Miss Pinup was pretty great. It must be very exciting. Ooh, what's this?
This looks like a print shop,
Yeah,
maybe.
page setting. They're page
yeah,
setting.
like letterpress.
Do you think that's in
It could be the Pittsburgh Courier.
Isn't it amazing, just these moments that have gone? I find these photographs utterly compelling. They refer to a world far removed from my own, and yet through Teenie's photographs, I get a sense of it, and a sense of the people. Who knows all the riches that these boxes of negatives will one day reveal? Do you remember when that was in its heyday?
Yes, it was it's called the state of the art as far as theaters are concerned. And to be honest with you, it's actually sad to look at it now because it was such a beautiful building.
It would have been wonderful. I mean, these kind of Art Deco decorations on the front here. What do you remember about your father? Was he a lively man? Was he a big personality?
My father was a guy that anybody would love to meet. He had a tremendous sense of humor. He had a smile that it was infectious. I think that's one of the things that made him so successful with taking pictures, because once he looked at you and smiled, all the kids and women or the men, whoever he was taking a picture, couldn't help but smile. And they enjoyed having him take their pictures.
Amazingly, while I'm talking to Mr. Harris Jr., a lady recognizes him and is keen to show us her own pictures taken by Teenie.
Well, you have a lot of stuff here.
Well, your dad took them.
Did he? Is this one of his pictures?
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yep.
There it is. There's the original.
Yeah.
When was this? 19...
Don't ask me.
I was only there.
I'm 86 now. I can't go back that far.
It was lovely to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah.
Good
Well,
seeing
good
you
seeing
again,
you
too.
You take care.
Good seeing you again,
I'm really
too.
glad you hung in there
Yeah.
and
Whenever you
came
come
over.
back to Pittsburgh, if you look me up, I'll be in Ebenezer Towers.
Okay.
Good
See you
to
later.
Bye.
Pittsburgh's heavy industry may be fading, but its cultural heart is beating stronger than ever. We'll miss it. That's if we can ever remember exactly where it is.
Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan,
Wasn't
West
Ohio
Virginia.
last week?
No, it was like 2 days ago.
Okay.
Kentucky.
You can't really count Kentucky. We literally were in there for 40 seconds.
I'm counting it. You went over the border.
I think, you see, I don't know about Kentucky.
West Virginia.
I completely lost track this week.
Pennsylvania.
I had a great week.
That's all right.
Adam? Adam? What are you doing? Adam, wait. Hey, buddy!
Next time on Artland, we catch up with the bus and head north toward and over the Canadian border.
I hit the road with photographer Shelby Lee Adams and go to one of the United States' foremost galleries, Deer Beacon.
And I meet the legendary John Chamberlain and check out Jackson Pollock's studio on Long Island.
That's close to your home, isn't it, Mame? Now, you sure you don't want to just take a train to the city and leave the last couple of weeks to me?
Oh, how can you say that? You know you'd miss me. Besides, who would do all the driving, research, dishwashing, ironing, looking after the crew, putting things in the car?
Wouldn't you like to quit your job and live the life you've always dreamed of? You're really living the dream, I would imagine, the expat dream.
I feel more free here than I do in the States.
This is it, man. This is the life. Join me, Savannah Jane Buffett, as I follow two buddies from college who quit their grueling office jobs and moved down to St. John to be bartenders in paradise. Now they're not just serving drinks, they've created the #1 microbrew in the Caribbean.
I looked out and there was about 30 cubicles. And at that moment, I said, I can't. I knew I wanted to roll the dice and that I wanted to take a break from what I was doing. Nice place to live, don't you think?
Not bad.
It was a very surreal feeling because this was all new to me. This was going to be my new home. At that point, we knew we were all in.
They're the lucky guys, man. They make beer for a living on an island.
It's just two guys hanging out in the Caribbean and brewing some great beer and, you know, living the dream, I guess.